Welcome to the Zeducation Leadership Podcast, where we bring stories, advice, and insights from world-class leaders right to you. Welcome to the Zeducation Leadership Podcast. I believe that when leaders level up, everybody wins. Their team, their family, their community, and even themselves. Here's something a lot of us get wrong. We think leadership has an age. We wait for our turn. We tell ourselves we need a few more years, a few more wins, a bit more gray hair before people will actually listen. And while we wait, we shrink ourselves to kind of fit the room. Today's guest never got that memo. Hausia is one of the youngest elected members in Auckland. He serves as Deputy Chair of the Ōtara Papatoetoe Local Board, and he does it while holding down a career as a civil engineer managing stormwater infrastructure. Two worlds, both serious, both at the same time. This episode is about how he leads across both and what he's learned about a truth a lot of us forget. Leadership is not pretending to be someone you're not, it's bringing your whole self. By the end, you'll walk away with a clearer picture of what age really has to do with leadership and how to lead as yourself in rooms that expect a different version of you. So let's get into it. V, welcome to the show, brother. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me here.
Awesome. It's our pleasure. Look, we like to kick off with the icebreaker. Okay. So what's one thing you believe about leadership that most people disagree with?
That is a good question. I think one thing I think about leadership, I don't know if people would necessarily disagree with this, but maybe have different views on it, is that good leaders aren't necessarily the loudest people in the room. I know that sometimes people think that, to be a leader, you have to be that dominant person or the one that's always leading from the front. From my experience in the things that I get up to, good leaders are good listeners. People who are able to read the room, people who's able to understand their role in the group or the room, and to facilitate a space where everyone who is part of a group or that room feels comfortable to say what they need to say. So that doesn't necessarily mean who's the loudest or who's the most dominant. But I know why, it's traditionally like that because of what we usually see on TV and that kind of stuff. So I'd challenge that thinking and be like, good leaders are people who actually are good listeners, and it's not necessarily the loudest person or people's in the room.
Love that. What a great way to start. Great leaders are great listeners. Sometimes people think of a great leader is someone who can stand up and speak with confidence. Yeah. But it's also someone who can sit down and listen.
It is. And I know some people might say, oh, such a cheesy comment, but it's such a true comment. Yes, it does help to be well-spoken. You've got to be able to portray ideas and bring people on the journey. But I do think that listening to understand plays a really important role, because that's how you lose your social license, is when you don't know what and why people are there, because you're not listening to understand, you're kind of listening to respond. So that's what I try to hold myself accountable to. I sit in the box. I'm quite a person who likes to talk a lot, so I always tell myself, when you're sitting in that meeting room, try listening more than you speak, and you'll be surprised with how much more you learn about, not just about the conversation, but you actually learn about other people as well. So yeah,
I love that. And there's a time and place to speak. There's a time and place to listen. And when I think of leadership, I think leadership is influence. And people think, you influence by speaking, but you could also influence by listening. Hey.
You can influence, and it's I like that you brought that up. You can influence by listening, because different groups, different people receive information in different ways. There are people that when I meet someone, the things that I think about is, what kind of person is this? How do they want information? When do they want to be told certain information? And how do they want that information? That way you can influence good outcomes, because if you go and it's only my way or the highway, it's going to be very hard to get your points across to certain people. So I think that's a really important thing. People might call it two-faced, or it's politicking. I don't think it is. I think it's strategy. You remain to your values, but you've just got to know the kind of people that you're dealing with, so that you're able to get your points across.
Nice. I love it. Yep. Communication, being strategic about it. Like you said, V, the who, the how, the when, all of that is important, eh? So, all right. So let's talk about your story. We want to get to know the man behind the politician, right? People see and read the news. I saw a video of your interview with you and Will on 531 PI yesterday, actually. So you're out there, right? You're talking, you're influencing, you're doing your thing. But take us back to the start. How did a young man from South Auckland like yourself become an engineer and also involved in politics at the same time?
Yeah, a lot of people do ask me that. Usually it was the question of, what led you to engineering? And then now people are like, what brought you into politics, So I guess it does start back from, to know who I am, I've got to speak about where I come from. I'm a New Zealand-born Tongan, born and raised in South Auckland. My parents, they immigrated here from Tonga. They're from a very small island. Tonga is a small island, but to go to where my parents are from, you go to another set of small islands, and then you hop on another boat, and then you go to smaller islands. We call it motu. And I've been there with my my parents took me and my siblings when we were young. And it's one of the most proudest things that I can remember, going back to where I'm from. Like, yep, this is my home. New Zealand is home to me. But it does feel different when you go to the land of where you're indigenous from, And I can see where my parents came from. So me and all my siblings were born here. I was born and raised in Favona. And I enjoyed science because I was that kind of kid that just asked heaps of questions, why is this and why is that? And I felt like at the time science answered a lot of my questions of how the world worked and all of that stuff. It's not until I went to university when I began to meet people from different backgrounds and all over Auckland. And the questions I then had at that time kind of developed to more societal issues. And science couldn't answer those questions. And without knowing it kind of led me down the path of politics. It led me down the path of politics, and then I began to, you meet friends who are more privileged than me. And I was never envious of those who were more privileged than me. But I did realize what privilege brings to a person's opportunities, And it just made me wonder. I was like, man, there's so much talent in South Auckland, but there's a lot of barriers as well. What happened if we strengthened our most vulnerable communities and we did our best trying to alleviate some of the barriers that our communities faced? How much different would society be? All these things going on in my head as I was studying engineering, and then everyone knows about central government, and then you learn about local government as well and the importance of what council does. I met the councillors, I met local board members, and I was a bit interested. I was like, this is interesting. Then I got to a point in time where I was like, I think I've got something to offer, I don't know all the answers, but I feel like I can add valuable things to the conversations that they have at that level. Put myself forward. It wasn't an easy journey getting in, but you gotta be able to put yourself forward in these kind of things. And then, long story short, you join groups, and groups run. I joined a political party. I'm part of the New Zealand Labour Party. There's an internal selection process that they have, selecting people to represent them in elections. So that's a whole process on its own, a selection process. Then after being selected, there was another whole journey on its own because, not successful here, not successful there. Then you go for elections when people vote for you to get in. So fortunately, this is my second term. My first term was last term, and then we had re-elections, or not re-elections, we had local government elections again in October last year. Bit of unique things happening in Papatoetoe. So I wasn't successful in the original elections, but in the by-elections that happened, I was successful there. So I'm currently serving as Deputy Chair of the Ōtara Papatoetoe Local Board. I love what I do. I love being an engineer. Both jobs are rewarding. They're different, but they're rewarding, and it keeps me busy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a bit about me. So no, I do what I do today because of where I've come from, the things that I've seen, but also because of what I believe can happen if we have the right people in the right spaces to add to that journey.
I love it. Can we go back to university? Where you said got more curious. You had a lot of questions around societal issues and stuff like that. What were some of those questions that you had back then?
So I was born and raised in South Auckland. I went to Whavena Primary School, Royal Intermediate, Onehunga High School. And I was always part of the majority. You know, there were heaps of Māori Pacifica kids that went to those schools. At university, so I went to the University of Auckland. I studied engineering at the Faculty of Engineering. In my first year cohort, there's 800 students. And of the 800 at my time, less than 1/10 were Māori and Pacifica. So it was quite an eye-opener for me just being a minority to start with. And then I quickly found things that I thought was normal in South Auckland is actually not really normal in the wider context of Auckland. I had friends from all over Auckland and who were well equipped. I remember them talking. We had university lab stuff, and we were doing all of these like using all this flash equipment. And I've never used it before because where I went to school, we had enough to learn. Like I still passed my sciences and stuff, but other kids from different schools had more than I guess what was needed because they could. You know, like I said, I'm not envious about that. Also, different communities have, you know, sometimes you drive through different parts of Auckland and it's like, man, they've got mean-ass playgrounds. I remember driving past Central Auckland and some of their playgrounds had like water things squirting everywhere. I was like, what? Like, you know, how is that possible? But that's because of the engagement that they had, and they're really good advocates, you know, and good on them. They're squeaky wheels and they know how the system works. They know when to stand up to council, and they know when council's like, let's have your say, tell us what you think. They tell council what they think, and then they're able to get the things that they've got today. So those were the kind of questions and the things that I saw. It started at uni, and then again, me asking all of those questions kind of just led me towards the path that I'm currently in now.
Yeah, I love that. You know, like there's a virtue aspect to comparison, and you look at, oh, you know, why have they got that and we haven't? You know, it gives you contrast and perspective. And you talked about how, you know, you realize that other people or friends had, you know, privileges or well equipped, right? What would you say to someone who might feel like, oh, you know, like they're like maybe comparing themselves a little bit and be like, you know, might feel a little bit discouraged, you know, comparing themselves, you know, this person is more privileged than I am. It's hard. Like, what can you say to someone like that who's going through that journey?
Yeah, and that is a good question. There's pros and cons to comparing yourself to others. In this case, I was comparing the outcomes of different communities based on what they had and where they're from and the types of people that live there. But it's also important not to compare yourself and then look down on yourself. You know, I never looked down on South Auckland. I looked at it from where are the opportunities? So I'm like, hey, there's a difference here. Not once did I feel embarrassed to be from South Auckland. Instead, I had the mindset of, cool, good on them. I never, you know, was like anti what they were doing. But how can we get that good stuff happening in South Auckland too? You know, and that's kind of what led me to where I am, because I was like, I want to be part of that conversation. Like, yeah, I know I don't have a magic wand to wave around and go abracadabra and everyone's happy, but it's important that you bring a positive vision, and then you add to the value that other leaders have contributed to. Because, you know, I'm only one point of a long journey. There's been really good leaders that have been here before me. I'm only adding to the conversation. So my commitment now is, for the opportunity and the privilege that I have, what positive changes can I influence in the time that I'm here? Yeah,
I love what we call is education, the ability to zoom in and zoom out. So zoom in. There's a time where you have to you focus on what's in front of you, the job, the task, get it done. You know, and there's that time where you have to step back, zoom out, and look at things from a bigger picture.
Yeah.
Right. And I love that you basically what you just shared there is like you're comparing the outcomes, but it wasn't like saying, you know, I'm jealous. It's like, how did you get that? You know, I want to know how you got there. Like, what did you do? Who did you talk to? And then now you know, leadership. You're saying, okay, how do I get that for other people, for our community? So I love the way that you're able to, you know, zoom in and then zoom out.
Yeah.
And for me, it comes back to like service, being service and community oriented, and that's leadership. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Now, how do you balance both? I assume you're still working as a civil engineer?
Yes. No, yeah.
And you're in politics.
Local government. That is a really good question. I'm quite fortunate that I'm able to balance both because I've got good support from both sides. In my engineering job, before I put myself forward for local government, I was already working for my company for about 6 years. So when I put myself forward, I kind of just, you know, laid the groundwork and said, hey, this is what I'm doing. If I get elected, this is what it means. They're very supportive. And they're still very supportive. They allow flexible work arrangements for me to be where I need to be. And then also with local government, I work as part of a team. So there's 7 of us on the local board. Yes, I'm deputy chair, so there's an extra layer of responsibility. And there is a lot of juggling. But I'm able to do what I do because I've got good support networks. My family is very supportive. I always think health is wealth. You know, I always make sure that I still go to the gym. I do all of those things because it helps keep me sane. You know, honestly, I just feel so flustered at the end of the day if I didn't, you know, get physically do anything. So yeah, it is busy, but you know, I am quite fortunate that I've got good support networks and people allow me to do what I do, but also give me the trust. Like. I'm outcomes focused. So yeah, I might not be sitting in the office from 8 to 5, but I'm working after hours. After this, I'm going to a meeting. Then I go home and then I work until I sleep. So I work until like 9:30, whether I'm reading emails or not. On the weekends, I'm working. But I choose to be able to do all of these things that I get up to.
Yeah. That's so cool. You know, and I love that you're outcomes focused. You know, it's not about, you know, how many hours, it's about the quality, you know. And I love that you invest in health as well. My audience is probably wondering, how many push-ups can you do without stopping?
Probably not as many as
you. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Well, are you the guy that likes to lift weights or CrossFit? Like, what kind of workout do you do?
Oh, man, I just do a whole bunch of random stuff. I do weights, I do cardio, group fitness classes. I try to do CrossFit, but my mobility is really bad.
Yeah.
My wrists and so I listen to podcasts when I go for walks. I just like I walk Mangere Bridge waterfront for like an hour and then I just listen to podcasts.
Yeah.
Turn off, but slightly turn on my brain a bit. Yeah. I feel like it really does. It does help, especially in the kind of environment that I'm operating in, but everyone has their own journey, you know. So it's really important to look after yourself because it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, or you'll burn yourself out.
Yeah. And everyone's different, right? Lifestyle
everyone's different.
And that.
Yeah.
But I still believe what you believe is like health is wealth. Like we think about the whare tapawha model, we think about the whanawhale model. Physical well-being is a strong aspect of it. Like you've got to invest in that. You've got to make time for it. It has to be a priority. Like. If we're talking to busy leaders out there, like what's your advice around prioritizing your physical health? Because you're doing a lot of things, but you make time for it.
Yeah, no, and that is a good question. Like I always tell my family and friends, like, yes, I'm busy, but keep telling me when there's events on. Because no matter how busy I am, there's always core things that's important to me. My nephew's birthday, he turned 6 today. And it's tradition in my family that we always start off with prayer and breakfast. And yep, I had other places to be, but I made sure that I was there, whether it was for 20 minutes, so my nephew can see that I was there. And I knew that it was a very important time, you know. So yep, everyone can be busy, but everyone's got 24 hours in a day and everyone's got 7 days a week. So how are you going to utilize that time? That's kind of what I use to prioritize what's important to me. And I always have rankings of things. Like for me, it's family first, then my engineering job, then my political job. Because politics can kick you out in 5 seconds, you know. But I'll always be an engineer. It's a safe job for me. It's a career. I enjoy what I do. But then above all, my family and my friends is who I can always fall back on. Yeah.
I love that. You must be the favorite uncle, eh? That's
Oh,
very cool.
I'm the...
That's really cool.
Yeah. Well, the good thing about being an uncle is when you get sick of the kids, you just chuck them back to their parents.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Look, so engineering and politics, they both run by different rules. How do you navigate both spaces? You got to be careful what you do in politics because it might leak over, and you got a reputation on this side with as a civil engineer, and vice versa. Like, how do you navigate two different worlds?
So the thing with politics is that it influences everything. You know, no matter what job you do, there's a linkage to politics, and that goes the same with engineering. Engineering and politics goes hand in hand in terms of how things work. The two different hats that I wear is that when I'm doing my engineering job, I'm in operations. So I'm part of the machine that makes things happen. When I'm in my local board role, that's me in governance. So I don't tell people how to do their job. I tell people what outcomes I want to see. And when I say I want to see, that's what the community wants to see. And it is really important to draw a fine line between operations and governance. That's probably one of the hardest things for me to grapple with in my first term, was understanding that fine line between operations. And you brought up a good point about zooming in and zooming out. Because when you talk to people on the street, usually it's about the zoom in issues, you know. It's when it's local issues like, oh, this parking here annoys me, or, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm like, yes, I hear your issue, but to fix it, you've got to zoom out. What is the wider issues here, you know? Council's a huge machine with heaps of wheels that have to move at the right times and at the right places for any outcomes to happen. And I feel like my job as an engineer, my job in my engineering role is to make things work. We get presented issues and then we have to think about how to make it work. So when I'm on the governance table, I kind of utilize both, you know. So, yep, these are the good outcomes that our community wants. But it's really important that I set clear direction, because we've got council staff that come in. Their job is to look over a certain portfolio, but it's really important that they get clear direction setting. So when they leave the local board chambers, they know exactly what is expected of their department. And I think the second part to your question is around things like in case there's like conflicts of interest or anything. Fortunately for my role, it's two different things. So there's local government. The project that I am on serves Crown, which is central government, NZTA related stuff. So it's not, Auckland Council budget doesn't really go to that level. But I wouldn't be able to be an engineer working for Watercare, for example, because that's local government. Gotcha. That's directly paid for by ratepayers, and decisions there are made by local. It might sound a bit confusing. So, for example, I can't be a Watercare engineer. I have a team. I don't know. I might be part of the wastewater team. And I might be like, oh, I'll direct funding to my team so that we can grow our team. You know, that there is a conflict of interest, and I wouldn't be able to do two jobs. And it's a good question you asked that, because that needs to be clear for anyone who's wanting to put themselves forward for local government. You've got to have that clear division so that there's no conflict of interest, whether it's real or whether it's perceived. Because you don't want people to lose confidence in our system. Yeah.
And I'm sure you're a transparent, I read that in the news, you're a very transparent guy. That's something that's very important to you. Transparency and integrity as well go hand in hand. I like that you are in the operational side of things with civil engineering, and then you switch roles into governance. How do you do that without losing yourself, man? How do you switch in between being operational and in governance?
Yeah, that, I know I've said that's a very good question like 45 times now, but that is a very good question. It took a while for me to understand the difference. When I was when I was on local board on my first term, I found it really difficult to comprehend all the information that was coming. Because my background as an engineer is that you've got to understand everything, all the nuts and bolts before you make a decision. And you have to eliminate as much uncertainty before you move ahead with something. On local board, you get presented so many things, and then you're asked for an opinion, and yet you don't really fully understand the whole picture yet. So over time, I kind of learned the difference. In my engineering job, what I would say there is that I know a lot about a little bit as an engineer. As in governance, I know a little bit about a lot of things. And you don't need to know everything of how things operate. You just need to know things at a high level. And then the direction you give to staff just needs to be at a high level, So let's say for local roads, right? You're not expected to set the specs for how roads are going to be built or anything. It's simple things like we need less potholes, or the drains need to be cleared. That might sound really silly, but those are simple things that would then set the motion for all. Like I said, those are zoom in direction setting, but the job of staff is then to zoom out and fix everything in council to make sure that those outcomes are reached. It took a bit of wrapping my head around to do, but and I'm still learning. That's what I like about both my jobs. I don't come here saying that I've got the answers to everything. I don't, but I do figure things out, and I like to learn. I learn every day.
I love that that you talked about the difference between the operational, the day-to-day, the doing versus the governance. Governance, it's not about the specs like you said. It's more like how many potholes, how are we going to get, how are we going to solve it? You're just asking the questions.
Yes, yeah.
You're not telling them, and then trust them to go and solve it.
You don't need to be an expert in the field. You just have to have a pulse of what that department does, and then think hard about what would people expect of that department, and not getting in the way of them. Let them do what they do best, And operations play a very important role. They need to be giving us timely information and correct information and fit for purpose data. We don't want to be bombarded with all these things to read and it just goes over our head. It needs to be, what do we need to know? When do we need to know it? And how do you inform us with that information? That's important because our communities, during elections, we go out there saying all these fancy things. And then once we get in there, we really need to make it happen.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I like that zoom in, zoom out thing because sometimes with politicians, three years is not long,
Yeah, it's fast.
It's fast. And then what the risk there is sometimes you might be incentivized to make quick win decisions, things that you can deliver in 3 years so that you can get re-elected again. You've got to do both. You've got to be able to do quick wins, but you've also got to be able to set directions over the long term. Things that, we might not reap the rewards this term or next term, but these are good things that's going to happen in 9 years, in 15 years, So it's a whole bunch of things that you've got to... And it's not new. I'm not saying that only I'm the politician that's dealing with this. Every politician deals with this kind of stuff. But I guess it's on my journey, it's interesting just learning about it. And I respect people who's been in my role beforehand, just the kind of things that they had to balance. It's important, but it's also, it can be quite tricky to navigate through as well.
Yeah, that's so cool. I sense a strong sense of humility from you. You know, the way that you talk, the way that you say things. So I'm not the only one, other people going through it. I'm still learning, I'm still growing. Like for me, like humility is an important trait of a good leader. And also I have a lot of respect for you in terms of getting out there. It's not easy being in politics, getting out of your comfort zone. But I feel that you're grown a lot as well. And I always encourage people, like even my brother, like a lot of them work in jobs. I said, if you want the promotions in that, you need to learn governance. You need to learn to be a little bit more strategic. You got to think different. You got to think beyond just the job, your job description. Go out there into the community, sign up for governance roles, look for nonprofits, maybe local school boards, and just learn governance. Like the best way to learn it is to get in there.
Yeah.
You know?
It's funny you say that in the same sentence, because that's the what I think is sometimes our greatest strength but weaknesses as well, is that our people are humble people, you know. We're happy to talk about good about other people, but when it comes to talk about good about yourself, you know, it's awkward. And I find that too. It's awkward when you have to sell yourself. But man, when you understand how the system works, there's a time and a place for everything. Sometimes you need to sell yourself. You need to do that awkward, cringe thing where you talk about your strengths, because that is one of the only ways to push yourself into these spaces. And sometimes you've got to push yourself into these spaces. Often the mindset that, you know, some people might have is, if I work really, really hard, like someone's going to notice it and give me what I deserve. Yes, that can happen sometimes, but more often than not, you've got to work hard, and then you've got to sing your praises and push yourself forward. And I share that because I feel like that's what will get more of our people into spaces like governance. We've got heaps of talent out there, so much talent, people who can do what I'm doing. But the question is, you know, I hope I just share through this podcast and through all of the things that I get up to, just that confidence that, man, you're good enough, you know. If you want to come into governance, don't wait until you know everything, because some people sometimes think, oh, yeah, I'll just wait a couple of years until I know a little bit more about this. Or if you're waiting to know everything, you'll be waiting forever, you know. Put yourself forward now. Like, things will fall into place. I always say things fall apart into place. And you'll learn on the job. With my job, with engineering, you need a degree and all of that stuff to get to where you're at. With politics, I always say that there's two things that you need. You need to be passionate about where you come from, and you need an opinion, you know. You come into these spaces to say things. You can't come in here and be afraid that you're going to upset this group, so you're not going to say something. Or what I usually say is, if you're not upsetting a group, you're doing nothing. You know, you've got to stand for something, and everything that you say is going to have a reaction to it. Like, there's going to be trade-offs, but as long as you stick to your values and you represent the people who have put you there, then, you know, that's how I go to sleep at night. I'm like, you know what? I made the best decision with the knowledge that I had and the values that I hold. So now I'm starting to tap off into different things. I did start off by talking about, you know, humility, being able to, you can still be humble, even when you're talking good about yourself, you know, because from that, that sets the chain reaction of other things happening as well.
Yeah, I love that. Humility is a strength. And as education, we always train our leaders and we say, look, there's a difference between being humble and being passive. Passive people, shy, let people walk all over them. Yes, people pleasing. Right? Humility is being respectful, being kind. You know, not thinking that you're above everyone, right? That's humility, right? You can still be humble and assertive and confident and bold at the same time, right? You can still be all those things.
No, you can. And I think another important point about humility and being bold and stuff is also navigating through difficult conversations, and through people don't like conflict, you know. But just because, like, even in local board, I've got good friends on governing body, but if these things we disagree with, we have to disagree, you know, and that's okay, that's fine. Even in the workplace, I'm not going to agree with someone else's ideas, but you've got to be able to listen to that person, make sure that that person feels comfortable to say what they've got to say, and they work things out. and you can that's still being humble. That's still humility. Humility is being able to listen with understanding and being comfortable with conflict, because it's gonna happen. You can't run away from conflict. And honestly, I'm still dealing with it, especially as a young person in governance. I try to avoid it where I can, But if I'm like, no, there's gonna be conflict here. I know it's gonna be. We're gonna disagree on this. I've got to go into there knowing that I've got to be comfortable with it. It's an all good thing. You got to have a respectful conversation, and then build off the common values. There's a lot of common things, even though you disagree with people. And I think that's one thing that will really help. It's helped me a lot, is dealing with conflict, but with a lot of our people is being able to navigate through that tricky thing.
Yeah. So how did you do it? I can imagine like you getting into politics and you a little bit anxious and nervous at the beginning, and then having to put yourself out there and your opinions and a bit of backlash, disagreement. How did you deal with it? How do you deal with it now?
It's a journey learning about how to do these kind of things. And I'm still learning. Like, I'm not perfect with the things that I do. But I guess when it comes to things like conflict or disagreements, that is very, very normal. It's normal everywhere, but especially in politics. The way that I approach it is that usually when you're talking with a group, everyone wants the same outcome, but everyone has different ways of getting there. So for me, the way that I try and facilitate things is understanding what their outcome is. And usually that's always easier to start off with, is this is what we all want. Then we talk about how we get there. What I like to start off first with is, where do we agree on? What are the things that we agree on? And then what are the things that we don't quite see eye to eye? And then trying to see where we can push and pull there. That way, you've already talked about what you agreed with, and then you just fixing those little bits and pieces that's not really aligned. It doesn't always work, but I always feel like more often than not, that's lowered the temperature, and it's become more outcome focused rather than talking about egos and all of that kind of stuff. There's a lot of things that I use.
I love it. There's that saying, it's not who's right, it's what's right. And we start like, what is it that we're trying to achieve? And I like the way that you framed it. Then we can have a conversation. We're arguing towards a solution.
Yeah.
Right? Rather than arguing against each other and who's right. I love that. Look, V, we're getting close to the end of our podcast. Man, we could sit here and talk for days. I love everything that you're sharing here, and I bet our audience is getting a lot of value just from your story, your experience, and insights. One of my last questions is, like, you've been in politics. This is your second term now that you said. Like, what's one of the biggest change that you've seen in yourself as a leader, with being a water engineer and also in politics? What's the biggest change that you've seen in yourself as a leader?
I think the biggest change so far in my career is not having preconceived ideas of things. So when I came into politics, I always thought, this is what I campaign on, this is what I think, and this is what I will always think, No one's going to change my mind. Like, this is what I'm standing firm on. That hasn't happened over the past years. I've changed my mind because these things that I've learned from different groups of people in this role, There's only 7 of us on the local board representing 100,000 people. So if I came into the space saying that I already know everything that I need to know to make decisions for the next 3 years, that shortchanges a lot of the other communities who aren't represented on the board. So one of the things that I've learned is that I don't know what I don't know, and changing my stance of things is not a sign of weakness or being indecisive, and that's really helped me a lot. I feel like I do a lot more of a better job being reflective and representative of the diverse communities that live in Ōtara Papatoetoe. And in turn, I've been able to channel what I've learned, what I've heard, the emotions that I felt at the places that I've been, and turn it into clear direction setting for for our council. So that's probably one of the learnings, many learnings, but that's probably a one that stands out for me.
That's awesome. I love it. And our final question is, if there's one takeaway that you want our audience to leave from this conversation with, what would it be?
One takeaway from listeners is just knowing that you, as you are right now, is enough. You know, often we're working towards a goal, and that's fine. We should always have goals, but we often tie ourselves with, once we reach that goal, then I will do X, Y, Z. You can do X, Y, Z now. You know, so one of the things that I hope that people got out of this interview is that, yep, I enjoy what I do. I'm in important spaces, but I don't know everything. And I never expected to be here. I thought that I was going to be a bit more wiser or something. But it all comes, things will fall into place. So you are enough as you are today, my friends.
You are enough. I love that. What a powerful and beautiful way to end the conversation today. Look, you've provided us with so much value. I feel a little bit more wiser and inspired after our conversation today, and just really grateful that you're able to come here and make time for us despite your busy roles and being a busy uncle. Thank you for your time. We're much better for it.
Thank you very much for having me here. Until next time.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning into the Zeducation Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to follow and subscribe for more episodes like this.